Hi guys, former spokesman for Tony Blair, Alastair Campbell, spoke to Channel 4 about the impact Nigel Farage is having not just on the Tories, but on Labour as well. Campbell also raised an issue that could become problematic for a Labour government, the backlash against the actual result. So we know that it's likely that Labour will win a massive majority and the Tories will be beaten into oblivion perhaps. But we could see a scenario where the Lib Dems' vote share remains the same, but they pick up dozens of seats. At the same time, Reform UK win millions of votes, but end up with either 1 or 0 seats. And this could be a headache for a future government. Alastair was also asked to give advice to Rishi Sunak, which was interesting. Have a listen.
Is the whole issue of the electoral system. That debate is going to get very complicated. If Labour were to get a massive majority on a, sub 40% kind of vote, if Reform were to get several million votes, but maybe no MPs, if the Liberal Democrats, which is entirely possible, were to get 40, 50 seats on exactly the same share of the vote as they had last time, that debate, I think, is one that maybe is going to start to emerge in the second half of the campaign.
Isn't Labour leaving a vacuum for Reform to fill? We had their manifesto, and there's nothing to talk about because there's nothing new in it. So it hasn't sparked a debate, and that's left the way clear for Nigel Farage to fill the gap.
No, I don't agree with that. I think that they made a virtue of having essentially put out the main elements of their policy proposals in advance. Yesterday was all about saying, you say there's no policy, you say there's no plan, here's a lot of policy, and it represents a plan. I do think there's a real problem with neither of the main parties kind of wanting to engage with Nigel Farage and his populist politics on its own terms, which means that Farage is allowed to carry on playing this game of almost being like a sort of the Johnson figure of modern politics.
So would you go out and attack him now if you were running the Labour campaign?
I would certainly be going after the damage that populism has done to this country. And I think that Farage represents a very dangerous force in our politics, and we should pander to it at our peril.
Alastair, if you were advising Rishi Sunak and trying to pull his campaign back on the rails, what would you be saying?
I guess the only thing he's got left now is to show there's a bit of fight in him. But the truth is, I think he's fallen victim to coming on the end of two of the worst prime ministers in the country's history. Johnson and Truss did massive damage to the Conservative Party. He hasn't differentiated himself from them enough. He's pandered to the right of his party rather than challenging it. And I'm afraid he's reaping what he sows. So I guess if I was being a genuine friend to him, I'd just say, look, try and enjoy it and get out the other end alive.
Yes, try and enjoy it and get out the other side alive. Yeah, there's nothing really Rishi Sunak can do. Now, let's go back to the main point here. The main point about Farage and Reform and proportional representation, because we generally think that, and I've mentioned before, and I didn't actually see this coming, but we generally thought that it would be the Liberal Democrats or people within the Labour Party that would push hard for proportional representation, a change from the first past the post system. And as was pointed out here, under first past the post, you could end up seeing a scenario where the Liberal Democrat vote share doesn't increase, but their number of seats in Parliament dramatically increases. The Labour Party as well. The Labour Party could win 40% of the vote, but a massive majority. And people will be scratching their heads. How is this possible? People who voted for Reform UK, saying, well, Nigel Farage has huge amounts of support. The party won millions of votes. Then how come this didn't translate into seats? The reason why, of course, it doesn't translate into seats is because it's spread all over Great Britain. It's not concentrated enough in certain constituencies. Now, I still think that Farage will win Clacton because they will pour so much resources into that. But millions of votes will not transfer into seats. And I think after Labour win a massive majority, there will be a lot of pressure on a future Labour government to change the electoral system. Now, that will not benefit Labour in the short term, and the people championing it will be, of course, Nigel Farage and the Reform UK. Now, will the media give him a platform to change the electoral system? Probably. They've given him a platform before when it came to Brexit. They gave him a platform in 2019, and they're giving him a massive platform at the moment, even though it's disproportionate. So I think what we're going to see is pressure applied to Labour to change the electoral system, not so much from the Liberal Democrats, but from Farage and Reform UK. Now, I think he'll have to do it from the outside. Obviously, he can't do it from within Parliament. And this could become a distraction. It could actually become the next Brexit. Now, how does Labour deal with Nigel Farage? I think what Alastair Campbell said here was very valid. Don't deal with him on his terms. Call out populism. Point to the failure of Brexit and link Farage to that. Link Farage's party to that. It's a party of failure. They were tested. They were never really tested in Parliament, but they were tested on their promises, and those promises have failed. Farage and populism said it would deliver sunlit uplands, and of course they did not arrive. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.